The sun was sinking low over the dry Texas plains, painting the sky in streaks of amber and crimson. The wind moved slow that evening, carrying with it the scent of dust and sagebrush, whispering through the brittle grass that stretched beyond the Maddox Ranch. It was a quiet kind of loneliness, the kind only wide land and old pain could breed. Inside the weathered ranch house sat Cole Maddox, a man as large and silent as the mountains beyond his land. Folks called him the giant rancher, not just for his size, but for his strength and the cold distance that surrounded him. He had been a legend once, a man who could tame any horse, fix any fence, and stare down any outlaw. But after losing his wife and little daughter years ago in a fire that burned half his ranch, Cole had shut the world out. He lived alone now, his days spent mending fences, feeding horses, and drinking coffee that tasted like rust and regret. No one came up his hill anymore, and he preferred it that way. That evening, the sound of a soft knock broke the silence. At first, Cole thought he imagined it. He glanced at the clock, nearly sundown. Visitors never came this late. The knock came again, faint but desperate, like the tiny hand of someone too weak to try again. He rose from his chair, boots thudding against the wooden floor, and opened the door. There she was, a little girl, no older than 7 or 8, standing barefoot in the dust. Her brown hair was tangled, her face smeared with dirt and tears. She clutched a ragged cloth doll against her chest as though it were the last thing in the world that hadn't abandoned her. Cole's rough voice came out low and uncertain. "Who are you, girl? What are you doing way out here?" The child swallowed hard, her small chest heaving. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak, but only broken words came. They hurt my mama," she sobbed. "They hurt her bad. She's dying." For a moment, Cole stood frozen. The words didn't seem to fit in the still air between them. His hand tightened around the edge of the door. He could hear the raw terror in her voice, not the kind that comes from a scraped knee or a lost toy, but the kind that comes when someone's world is falling apart. "Who hurt her?" he asked, his voice turning sharp. "Bad men. Down by the river," she said between sobs. "They said we had no right to be there. Mama tried to tell them we weren't taking their land, but they started hitting her. She told me to run." Her voice broke completely, and tears spilled freely down her dusty cheeks. Cole knelt down slowly, his shadow stretching long across the porch. For the first time in years, his hard eyes softened. He remembered another little girl, his own, who once ran barefoot across this same porch, laughing, chasing butterflies in the golden light. The memory struck him like a hammer to the chest. "Where's your mama now?" he asked gently. "In the old cabin. Near the creek," the girl whispered. "She's not moving much. Please, mister. Help her." Cole looked out toward the horizon, where the sun was dying behind the hills. The land was still and empty, except for the faint line of smoke curling far off in the distance. Something inside him, something buried deep beneath years of bitterness, began to stir. He straightened up, his broad frame casting a shadow over the doorway. "All right," he said firmly, reaching for his hat. "You stay close, little one. We're gonna find your mama." The girl looked up, her eyes wide and wet, unsure if she could trust him. But when she saw the steady determination in the rancher's weathered face, she nodded. Cole grabbed his rifle from the wall, threw on his duster coat, and stepped off the porch into the fading light. As he helped the little girl onto his horse, the first stars began to pierce the purple sky. The wind carried her soft, trembling voice once more. "Thank you, mister." Cole gave a small nod, tightening his grip on the reins. For the first time in years, the giant rancher rode out, not for cattle, not for land, but to save a life. The night settled thick over the plains as rancher Cole Maddox and the little girl rode through the wild country. The only sounds were the steady rhythm of hooves against dirt and the soft creak of leather. Above them, the stars stretched endless, glimmering like tiny lanterns over the land. The child clung tightly to Cole's coat, her face pressed against his back to hide from the chill wind. Cole hadn't spoken much since they'd left the ranch. He wasn't a man of words, never had been. But his mind raced. Every few minutes, he glanced down at the girl, making sure she was still holding on. She was trembling, exhausted, but there was something fierce in her, the same stubborn fire he used to see in his daughter's eyes. After several miles, Cole slowed the horse near a patch of trees and pulled to a stop beside a stream. He climbed down and lifted the girl gently to the ground. "We'll rest a minute," he said quietly. "You got a name, little one?" She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Lily," she said softly. "Lily May." Cole nodded. "Pretty name," he said, crouching by the stream to let the horse drink. Then he looked back at her. "Tell me what happened, Lily May." For a moment, she hesitated, hugging her doll tight. Then, in a shaky voice, she began. "Mama and me. We were staying in the old cabin by the river. It used to belong to my grandpa. We was just trying to get by. Then this morning, some men came. They said the land wasn't ours anymore, that we had to leave." Cole's brow furrowed. "Men from the Turner Ranch, maybe?" he asked, already guessing. Lily nodded quickly. "Yes, sir. Mr. Turner's men. Mama tried to tell them we weren't taking anything. She said we just needed a place to stay for a while. But they laughed at her." Her little voice cracked as she went on. "Then one of 'em hit her. Real hard. She fell, and they just kept hitting her. She told me to run and find help." Cole's jaw tightened until the muscles in his neck stood out like cords. The Turners, he'd known that name since he was young. Greedy ranchers, the kind who used power and fear to take whatever they wanted. Cole had stayed out of their way for years. But this was different. Lily sniffled, looking up at him. "You'll help her, won't you, mister?" He looked into her wide, desperate eyes, and something in his chest cracked open. For years, he'd shut the door on the world, telling himself it was easier not to care. But now, this little girl stood before him, the image of the child he'd lost. And he realized that some things, some people, still deserve to be fought for. "I'll help her," he said, his voice low but steady. "You got my word." He stood, pulling the rifle from its sheath and checking the chamber. The old Winchester gleamed faintly in the starlight, oiled, loaded, ready. He hadn't used it in years, but his hands remembered every motion. Lily watched him, eyes wide. "Are you gonna hurt those men?" Cole paused, glancing toward the dark horizon. "If they're smart, I won't have to," he said. "But if they ain't, I'll do what's right." He helped her back onto the horse and climbed up behind her. The air had grown colder now, the wind sharper, like it carried a warning. Still, Cole urged the horse forward, its hooves striking sparks from the rocks as they crossed the ridge. As they rode toward the river, the moon broke through the clouds, casting silver light across the valley. Cole could see faint smoke rising in the distance, just where the girl had said her mother was. He leaned forward, whispering to the horse. "Hold on, Lily," he said, his voice calm but fierce. "We're almost there." The little girl gripped his coat tighter. Behind them, the vast plains stretched silent and empty, but ahead, destiny was waiting by the old cabin near the river. And for the first time in years, the giant rancher felt a purpose burning inside him stronger than fear, anger, or loneliness. He was riding toward redemption, and toward a reckoning. The wind began to shift as they crossed the open plains, a low, restless murmur that rolled through the grass like a warning from the heavens. The moonlight dimmed behind gathering clouds, and the night air thickened with the scent of rain and electricity. A storm was coming. Cole Maddox tightened his grip on the reins. His horse, a gray Mustang named Jasper, tossed its head and snorted nervously, feeling the tension in the air. Beside him, the little girl clung to the saddle horn, her small hands trembling but determined. They had been riding for nearly an hour when the first crack of thunder split the sky. It echoed across the valley like a gunshot, startling the horses in the distant pastures. Cole's hat brim caught the flash of lightning, and for an instant, the land around them lit up in ghostly silver, the rugged cliffs, the rolling plains, the far-off ribbon of the river glinting under the storm's glare. "Keep your head down, Lily," he shouted over the wind as the rain began to fall, sharp and cold. Lily buried her face against his coat, and Cole urged Jasper faster. The storm came down in sheets, soaking through his duster and stinging his skin, but he didn't slow. Each thunderclap seemed to echo the pounding of his own heart. He wasn't just racing the storm, he was racing time. Images from long ago flickered in his mind. Another storm, another night, when fire had devoured his home and taken everything he loved. He had tried to save them, his wife, his little girl, but he'd been too late. That helplessness had haunted him every day since. But tonight, he swore, would not end the same way. The land dipped into a shallow valley as they neared the river. The trees swayed violently, branches snapping in the wind. Cole could see faint orange glimmers through the rain, a small lantern light flickering near the old cabin. "There," he said, pointing ahead. "Hold tight." They rode down the slope, mud splattering under the hooves. The cabin came into view, old and half-collapsed, its roof sagging under years of neglect. Smoke curled weakly from a broken chimney, and the front door hung loose on one hinge, creaking as the storm battered it. Cole jumped down before Jasper had even stopped. He lifted Lily off the horse and set her under the porch roof. "Stay here, sweetheart," he said, voice steady but urgent. "Don't move till I say so." The girl nodded, wide-eyed, clutching her doll. Cole pushed the door open with his shoulder. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of blood, rain, and smoke. The single lantern on the table cast a dim glow over the room, and there, on the floor, lay a woman. Lily's mother. She was pale, barely conscious, her hair matted with blood. A torn blanket was wrapped around her shoulders, and every breath she took sounded like it might be her last. Cole knelt beside her and gently lifted her head. "Ma'am," he said softly. "Can you hear me? I'm Cole Maddox. Your little girl brought me." Her eyes fluttered open for a moment. "Lily," she whispered. "Is she safe?" "She's right outside," he assured her. "You're gonna be all right. I'll get you help." The woman's lips trembled. "They said they'd come back. They said this land was theirs now." Cole's jaw hardened. He looked around the cabin, overturned furniture, muddy footprints, and a broken chair that told a story of violence and fear. "Not anymore," he muttered. He grabbed the blanket, tightened it around her, and called out, "Lily, come in here." The little girl ran in, soaked but brave, and dropped to her knees beside her mother. Cole stood, watching them, his chest tightening with something deep and unfamiliar, the sting of empathy he'd buried long ago. Outside, lightning flashed again, illuminating the muddy tracks leading away from the cabin, fresh, heading north toward the Turner Ranch. Cole's hand found the rifle slung across his shoulder. His eyes followed the tracks, and something in him settled, cold, certain, unyielding. He turned back to the girl. "Stay with your mama," he said. "Keep the door locked. I'll be back soon." Lily looked up, fear and hope warring in her eyes. "Where are you going, mister?" Cole's voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of thunder. "To talk to the men who did this." He stepped out into the rain, the storm raging harder than ever. But to Cole Maddox, the storm outside was nothing compared to the one that had just awakened inside him. The rain didn't let up as Cole Maddox rode toward the Turner Ranch. It fell in heavy, relentless sheets, blurring the horizon and turning the dirt roads into rivers of mud. But Cole kept going, his hat pulled low, his rifle strapped across his saddle, and his heart beating steady with a quiet, burning rage. Lightning flashed above, throwing his shadow long against the wet ground. To anyone watching, he looked less like a man and more like a ghost, a grim figure riding out of the storm, just as clenched in his hands. By the time he reached the Turner Ranch, the storm had dulled to a steady drizzle. The place stood silent under the gray sky, big barns, wide corrals, and a sprawling house with its windows still glowing. Laughter spilled faintly from inside. The men were there, the same ones who had left a woman bleeding in a broken cabin. Cole swung down from his horse and tied the reins to the fence. His boots squelched in the mud as he walked toward the house. With every step, his anger hardened into something sharper, colder, not blind fury, but purpose. Through the open doorway, he could see them, 3 men gathered around a table, bottles half empty, their laughter loud and careless. One had a fresh bruise on his jaw, likely from the fight earlier that day. Another was bragging about how they taught that squatter woman a lesson. Cole stepped into the doorway. The laughter died instantly. The tallest of the men, Walt Turner, the foreman and right hand of the ranch owner, looked up, his grin fading. "Well, I'll be damned," he said slowly. "Cole Maddox. Didn't think you left that lonely hill of yours no more." Cole's voice was low and steady. "You and your boys hurt a woman down by the river today." Walt chuckled, trying to sound brave. "Wasn't our fault. She was trespassing. Turner don't like squatters on his land." Cole took another step inside, rain dripping from his coat. "That land don't belong to Turner. It belonged to the McGraw family, her family. She had every right to be there." The youngest of the men, half drunk, smirked. "Ain't none of your business, old man. Go home before you get hurt." Cole's eyes flicked to him, cold, cutting, final. The young man's smirk faded fast. Walt leaned back in his chair, forcing a laugh. "You ain't law, Maddox. You can't tell us what to do." Cole raised his rifle and leveled it at the floorboards. Boom! The shot exploded like thunder, splintering the wood inches from Walt's boots. The bottle on the table jumped, shattering in a spray of glass and whiskey. Silence fell. Cole's voice came like iron through the smoke. "I ain't law," he said. "But I know right from wrong. You beat a defenseless woman in front of her child. That makes you lower than a coyote, and I don't let coyotes live long." The three men froze, eyes wide, realizing the storm that stood before them wasn't bluffing. "Now," Cole continued, lowering the rifle slightly, "you're gonna make this right. You'll take your wagons, your tools, and your sorry hides down to that cabin by the river. You'll fix what you broke. You'll pay for her medicine. And you'll do it before sundown tomorrow." Walt swallowed hard. "And if we don't?" Cole stepped closer, his towering frame casting a long shadow over them. "Then I'll be back," he said softly, "and next time, I won't aim for the floor." He turned and walked out without another word, the thunder rolling behind him like approval from the heavens. Outside, the storm had finally begun to pass. The rain eased into a soft drizzle, and a faint hint of dawn glowed in the east. Cole mounted Jasper and rode off into the gray morning, the wind at his back and his conscience burning clear for the first time in years. Behind him, the Turner men stood trembling in silence, men who'd thought themselves untouchable, now shaken by one rancher's quiet fury. Cole didn't look back. He'd done what needed to be done. But deep down, he knew this wasn't the end. There was one more thing left to do, the hardest part of all. It was time to face the people he'd saved. And the ghosts he'd carried for so long. By the time Cole Maddox rode back toward the river cabin, the storm had rolled on, leaving the world washed and quiet. The land shimmered beneath the pale light of dawn, wet grass glistening, puddles reflecting the sky. The air was fresh, almost peaceful, as though nature itself had forgiven the violence of the night. Cole's coat was still soaked, his hands rough on the reins, but something inside him felt lighter, a burden he hadn't known he was carrying had begun to lift. He'd faced the men who'd brought harm, and for once in his life, he hadn't chosen vengeance. He'd chosen justice. When he reached the cabin, the door creaked open before he could dismount. Lily Mae ran out barefoot into the mud, her little face bright with hope. "Mister, you came back," she cried, her voice full of relief. Cole swung down from Jasper and crouched to her level. "Told you I would, didn't I?" he said softly. She nodded, then pointed toward the cabin. "Mama's awake. She's talking again." Inside, the small room was lit by morning sun streaming through the cracks in the walls. Lily's mother, pale but conscious, sat up against a pillow with a weak smile. The color was slowly returning to her face. She looked fragile, but alive, a miracle, given what Cole had seen the night before. "Mr. Maddox," she whispered, her voice still faint. "You saved us." Cole shook his head. "No, ma'am. Your little girl did. She's the bravest soul I ever met." Tears welled in the woman's eyes as she looked at her daughter. Lily was sitting beside the bed, clutching her mother's hand. "I told you I'd find help," she said proudly. Cole stepped closer, pulling a folded bandana from his pocket. "You'll need medicine and proper rest. I'll send Doc Harris down here. And some men will be coming by later to fix this place up." The woman frowned weakly. "The Turner men?" Cole nodded once. "Aye. They'll rebuild what they broke. I gave 'em a choice, Work or ruin. They chose work. She looked shocked. You didn't hurt them? Cole's eyes softened. No. Not this time. He glanced at Lily, then back to her mother. I've done enough hurtin' in my life. It's time somebody showed those men what mercy looks like. Outside, the sound of wagon wheels broke the quiet. Lily ran to the door and gasped. The Turner men were already arriving, heads hung low, their hands full of lumber and tools. They didn't meet Cole's eyes as they stepped down, too ashamed to speak. The townsfolk began to gather, too, drawn by the story that had spread overnight. Word traveled fast in small places, and everyone wanted to see if the rumors were true. They whispered among themselves, eyes wide. Cole Maddox stood up to the Turners. He didn't shoot a soul. He made them fix what they destroyed. For years, Cole Maddox had been a legend of solitude, the giant rancher who spoke to no one, who kept to his land and his ghosts. But that morning, as he stood beside the little girl and her mother, something in him changed forever. Lily tugged at his coat. "Mr. Cole," she said shyly, "you can stay for breakfast if you want. Mama makes real good biscuits when she's better." Cole smiled, a real smile, faint and rough at the edges but full of life. "Maybe I will, someday." He turned toward his horse, tightening the saddle strap. Before he mounted, Lily ran forward and wrapped her arms around his leg. "Thank you," she whispered. He paused, resting his large hand gently on her head. "Take care of your mama," he said. "And don't ever stop being brave." Then he climbed onto Jasper and rode off into the morning light. The wind caught his coat, the sky opened wide above him, and for the first time in years, the giant rancher rode with peace in his heart. Behind him, the cabin filled with warmth and laughter, a symbol of healing, of courage, and of a man who had stunned everyone not with his strength, but with his mercy.